it to me. Dr. Bay, I want to thank you for having me here today, but I want to just kind of set something up right off the bat and kind of put everybody's mind at ease. I am a nice guy, but no, I'm not winking at you. In the summer of 1977, I was a 10-year-old boy waiting to go to the Elmwood Royals football camp. The Elmwood Royals is the high school football team that is where I would be going once I got to that age. And so first of all, 10 years old, that makes me 50, in case none of you like to do math in your head. Anyways, as I'm waiting to go to the football camp, I'm really excited about it, and I get to see so many people that I look up to. As a 10-year-old boy, you can imagine my excitement. We got to a point where we had the camp, and I went to the first day, and everything seemed to be fine. Had a little bit of a headache towards the end of the day, but I thought it would be no big deal. Next day, same thing happened. Third day, I went to the camp, and towards the end of the camp, I still felt okay, but when I got home, I really felt ill. I laid on the couch, and finally, when I got up from the couch, I walked into my mom and dad's restroom, and they had these saloon-style doors. Have you ever seen those? Well, those saloon-style doors separate the sink from the restroom. And all I remember seeing are those saloon-style doors. And I'm told that I passed out. And I passed out, and I fell into the toilet bowl. Out of all things to fall into, I fall into a toilet bowl. Well, they took me to medical college, or they took me to Bowling Green's Wood County Hospital, and they quickly diagnosed that they're not equipped for this sort of thing. Then they took me to Toledo Hospital. They said, we're not equipped for this kind of thing. On to Medical College of Ohio. At the Medical College of Ohio, they said, okay, you have hydrocephalus, and I'm not sure how much of this means to you, but hydrocephalus is buildup of fluid on the brain. And I said, well, okay. As a 10-year-old boy, I just wanted to be better so I could go play football again. Well, that wasn't the case. They had to put a shunt in my head, a shunt that I have until this day. So the shunt drains fluid from my brain to my abdomen all the way down. And like I said, it's been revised a couple times, but it's still with me to this day. I thought that I was going to be a football player. That's what I wanted to do. And I mean, of course, I look like a football player, right? But that's what I wanted to be. And I was crushed. My whole career as a football player was gone, even before it started. Everything was normal for the next 15 years. Everything seemed to be okay, except for one event. I met and married my wife of 27 years, Connie Bruggemeyer, now Connie Wagner. And she's here with us today. That is my real hair. I don't know how much of that's head and how much of that's hair, but that is my real hair. Well, there was a lot that went on during the course of time that really led us to a number of things in terms of my well-being. There was the summer of 1992. I experienced numbness down the entire right side of my body, and I wasn't sure why. We went to the University of Chicago, where Dr. Locke McDonald said that I had 2 cavernous malformations. Actually, he said that I had 1, cavernous malformation. So a cavernous malformation is a malformed blood vessel. And I don't need to tell you, I'm sure, but it can form anywhere in your body, and mine just happened to have formed in my brainstem. And there wasn't just 1, but there was 2. I went in one day and had an angiogram. When I had the angiogram, as I was being wheeled in, one of the nurses said to me, as I'm laying in the bed, being wheeled in, she says to me, wow, this is really interesting. Most people with your condition are in a coma. I think that was supposed to make me feel better because I was doing so well. Well, he said after the angiogram and all that, where they did a number of tests on me, he said that I'd be able to do everything that I could normally. So with the exception of lifting heavy weights, which meant that I couldn't do nearly as much housework as I'd done before. Then there was the next year where I was in Davenport, Iowa with a colleague. We're in a Walgreens store working on doing different things, and that's who our customer was. And we left that store and we ended up going to the Jolly Roger Hotel. At the Jolly Roger Hotel, we had separate rooms. In those separate rooms, we, slept. Everything was okay, no problem. He went down to the lobby, evidently, the next morning, and I never came down. Well, he ended up calling the front desk, had the front desk call my room. Then he had the front desk break down the door of my room. I had slipped into a coma. So the lady that had this idea that I should be in a coma, she was right. Well, from there, Connie was called, and this is back in 1993, so I'm not sure how they got a hold of her, but she was in St. Louis, and they got her to Davenport, Iowa. My mom and dad were in Branson, Missouri. They got a hold of them somehow, and they got to Davenport, Iowa. And then I was taken by emergency squad from Davenport to the University of Chicago. At the University of Chicago, again, they diagnosed me and said, well, actually this time they said that I had a blockage in my shunt. So I'm shunt dependent, among other things. So as I'm shunt dependent, they needed to revise my shunt, and that's one of those times. Then in Orlando, Florida, just in 1996, I'm doing another store, and I'm down there at an Albertson store this time. Spent all night working, came back the next morning from Orlando, had to go to bed, and when I went to bed, I wanted to be able to be sure that I was asleep, so I had a couple beers. And after that, I slept well. I slept too well, and I slipped into a coma again. Those times are difficult for me to remember, but they must be even more difficult for my wife to sit there and hear about. The story's not about me. The story's about her and what she's done for me along the way. And it's also about all of you and all of the care that you've given to people like me. I want to really tell you how much I appreciate that. Then in November of 2010, the Buckeyes were playing Penn State that day. I know because my niece texted me and said, hey, Uncle Brian, I've got 2 tickets for the game. Do you want to go? From my hospital bed in the emergency room of Riverside Methodist Hospital, I said, I'm sorry, I'm kind of busy right now. Well, that's where they diagnosed me with 2 cavernous malformations instead of just 1. And they said that I had, one of my cavernous malformations had bled. Well, it had bled, putting pressure on the nerves that control my vision. Both of my eyelids were half open. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. They wouldn't open all the way, and they really wouldn't close all the way. It was strange. So they said, well, whatever you do, don't ever let anyone operate on your brainstem, because your cavernous malformation is in your brainstem. That's the worst possible place they could ever operate because of all the things that are in there. Okay? They gave me some steroids, went home. 2 weeks later, everything was back to normal. I thought, this is great. March 4th of 2011. As Dr. Bay said, I woke up and had a bleed of my cavernous malformation. But I woke up on the couch that morning not knowing anything was going on. I had been traveling all day the day before in Cleveland. And not knowing what was going on, I started to notice some blurry vision. I noticed that things weren't quite right. It took me 4 hours to come home from Cleveland. As you know, that's a 2-hour ride, right down 71. And I got on the couch that night, and I just wanted to stay there. I stayed there, woke up, like I said, that morning of March 4th, and was able to understand that I was in some place that I didn't know where I was. Have you ever had that feeling where you're someplace else when you wake up, but you're not really sure how you got there? Well, that was me. I stumbled my way to the restroom, and I turned on the light switch. Nothing seemed to happen. I turned towards the mirror, and when I looked in the mirror, I actually noticed out of the bottom of my eyes were 2 little slits. And those 2 little slits showed me that I could see something. Both of my eyelids were all the way down, and I couldn't do anything to lift them unless I took one finger and I held it open like this. That would be how I saw for the next 6 months. If I wanted to see much of anything, I would hold my eye open like this. It was one of the most difficult times that I've been through. But the doctor came into the emergency room that day and said, "Mr. Wagner, I'm sorry, but one of your cavernous malformations had bled. And it appears as though, again, it's putting more pressure on the nerves that control your vision." I understand. So what would you recommend that we do? We're recommending that you have brain surgery. Wait a minute. We just had this conversation 4 months ago, and you said don't ever let anyone operate on your brainstem. At the time, that was our advice. However, your problems are only going to become worse and more frequent. Worse and more frequent. Those are the words that I heard over and over and over for the next months. Mr. Wagner, we can tell you that there are 3 doctors that we recommend having this surgery because we're not equipped for this sort of thing here. Well, one of those doctors is in Phoenix. The second is at Stanford. And the third is at Cleveland Clinic. I live in Ohio, so I'd probably just go there. Understand, we gave those to you in order. So we waited. We ended up going to Cleveland Clinic to talk to the doctor there. And after about an hour and a half of conversation, mostly conversation from Connie because I was not fit to talk, let alone understand much, she asked the pointed question, "Doctor, if you were us, what would you do?" He said, without hesitation, "I'd go to Phoenix." There you go. 2 weeks later, actually a few weeks later, we got a call. The call was from Barbara with Dr. Spetzler's office. Dr. Spetzler was the doctor in Phoenix that was able to have the surgery. He had approved me for surgery. I was approved for elective brain surgery. Awesome. How much better could that be? Well, he said he was approving me, but he said now there's a 50% chance that things are going to stay the same. Like, okay, I got 2 eyes that won't open. I cannot see. Okay, there's a 25% chance that things are going to get better. Okay, so I'll be able to get my full vision back, and I'll be back to doing all the things that I've done before. I'll be on the golf course. I'll be able to drive, all that stuff. She said, well, there's also that 25% chance. And I knew what that meant. That was not a fun time. So she said, now understand, he is available. His next time that he's available is on April 1st. Are you kidding me? It didn't matter. Now understand, he's also not going to be around that night that after he has a surgery, but his team will be there, so they'll take care of you. Well, the nice part is that when I went there, there was a team there, and they were phenomenal. But I'll tell you, before I went there, I spent the next 2 weeks after that with Maker's Mark and an iPod Shuffle from my oldest son. It was loaded up with Beatles and Dire Straits and Pink Floyd and all the good bands. That helped. It wasn't perfect, but that helped. But time went on. Time went on. I mean, my oldest son, he was 16, and he had just discovered girls. My situation didn't really, it mattered, but, he's 16. My daughter at the time was 13. And if any of you have ever been a 13-year-old girl or have a 13-year-old daughter, you know what I'm talking about. She was 13. Well, our youngest son, Colin, he was 11, and all he wanted to do was play for his high school basketball team. Well, when he grew up, much like his dad wanted to play football. He's a great kid, and we wanted to have him have what he wanted, so he wanted to be able to practice. Well, he wasn't able to practice because our basketball hoop was broken. We knew we needed to get a new hoop before I went to surgery. We'd done some research. Actually, when I say we done some research, Connie had done some research. And she'd pulled up, some information on this basketball hoop, and things seemed to be going okay. She got some coupons because Connie is the coupon queen. And she put them in a manila envelope because we pretty much have a manila envelope for everything. And my friend Eric was nice enough to come get me that day. He got me because for 6 months I couldn't drive. I couldn't see. I went in to Connie and I grabbed that manila envelope and I said, we're going to Dick's Sporting Goods. Walked out the door, got into Eric's van. And I threw my papers down on the floor and I said, dang it! Why can't I see? Why can't I see? That ride to Dick's was quiet. There was nothing that could be said. We made it to Dick's. We got the basketball hoop. A few months later, it was installed. It took a while. It was one of those springs, March, April, May, where it just rained and rained and rained. Well, we got the hoop in, and on April 1st of 2011, I had brain surgery. But life had gone on. Life had gone on. When I had surgery that morning of April 1st, I had no idea what to expect. I just knew that they were going to fix me. I was going to get back to normal. I had no idea that this was my new normal. Connie was there with me, along with my friend Eric, and my brother Neil had driven in with his wife, driven from Northwest Ohio to Phoenix. Yes, my brothers are kind of crazy. Well, that afternoon after having surgery, I was able to walk the hall. The afternoon after having brain surgery, I was able to walk the hall. Now, I did have a little curtain closure assistance from my brother Neil. I mean, there's some things that nobody needs to see. The next morning after having surgery, I was discharged from the hospital. 24 hours after having brain surgery, and trust me, I've got a scar back here to prove it. I was discharged from the hospital, and all they gave me was a bottle of extra strength Tylenol and a prescription for Percocet. We didn't want to have that prescription filled. The next 3 or 4 days, we spent at this Fairfield Inn in Phoenix, next to the IHOP. Went to the IHOP every morning for breakfast. I love that place. Connie would take me by the hand, and we'd walk around the block. It was beautiful in Phoenix, and I couldn't see much of it, but it felt good. Oh, and one other thing, I didn't mention this earlier, but they actually videoed my surgery, and they gave it to me on a DVD. I have that, and I've watched it once. But kind of like one of my first wrestling matches, it was one of those things where I didn't need to watch it a second time. Well, after a few days there in Phoenix, we did board the plane for home, for Columbus. But before doing that, we did get the prescription filled for Percocet. And I just didn't want to mess with it, but I knew that flying at that altitude with air pressure, I wasn't sure what was going to happen. So we boarded the plane, and we sat there and started down the runway, made it to 30,000 feet, and I had made the airline tickets, and a blind guy making airline tickets means that we're flying first class. So we flew first class, and they brought out our food. Well, when they brought out our food, it wasn't long before I started giving it back. That was the worst 4 hours of our life because I couldn't stop. I had dry heaves, and Connie had to sit there with me, knowing that I could be doing damage to my brain, knowing that I could be doing damage to the sutures, knowing that I could be doing a lot of damage just to me. I apologize for making you sit through this story again. I can't imagine. She had to sit through it the first time, and now she's here with me today, sitting through it again. Well, we made it to Columbus. My friend Pete came and picked us up, and we went home. There, shortly thereafter, she determined that the problems that I was having was because of the Percocet. We went back to extra strength Tylenol, and that was a good thing because every day I wanted to get better. Every day I showered and shaved. Actually, shaving has cost me one of my favorite shirts. I came downstairs and I just thought that I was getting better every day, and that's my mindset. I told people on the phone that I'm doing fine. But there were times where I wasn't doing fine. I wasn't doing fine when I was trying to get my eyes back into shape. I thought, I was going to get my vision back. So I went to see an ophthalmologist, and he moved the muscles around on my eyes because I have an image here and I have an image down here. He was moving the muscles around on my eyes in order to get them here, images, and then to get them here. So at least from a forward-on gaze, I would have one image. That, for whatever reason, didn't seem to work. But I said to him, I understand it didn't work, but I would really like to get more light into my eye. I'm not sure what to do. I have a friend here at Ohio Health. His name was Ron Hall. He had this thing where he trimmed his eyelids. He had a doctor trim his eyelids, and it brought more light into his eye. I'm like, maybe I should try something like that. Well, this ophthalmologist had a different idea. He had an idea of putting in a frontalis sling. A frontalis sling is where they put fishing line in your forehead, and it connects your forehead to your eyelid. So when I go like this, both of my eyes come open. Sounds great until you go back to the fact that I see double. So all that does is make my double vision worse. Sometimes taking action isn't always a good thing, but I like to take action. Again, still I get the question. And no, I am a friendly guy, but no, I'm not winking at you. Sayings have changed. How many here have ever heard of the movie Kindergarten Cop? Yeah, clapping. Wow, that's cool. In Kindergarten Cop, Arnold Schwarzenegger plays a cop who is being a kindergarten teacher. Well, as he's there one day, he's rubbing his head, and one of the students says, "Mister, what's wrong?" And Arnold says, "I have a headache." I'm not going to do an Arnold impersonation because I'm not that good. Anyway, so the student says, "Well, maybe it's a tumor." And he's like, "It's not a tumor." Well, for a long time, we used to use that line at our house. You know, whenever somebody would say they had a headache or whatever, we would say, "Well, maybe it's a tumor." That was funny for a long time until somebody had a tumor. And this time it wasn't me, it was Connie. And Connie didn't have a brain tumor, but she still had a tumor nonetheless. For 10 years now, 9 years actually, she has been cancer-free, although there was a tumor that came back once, so we're still monitoring all that. So she's doing much, much better. If you can't tell, I like to have fun, even though I'm not normal, even though I see differently. I like to have fun with my situation. So I've made up my own nickname. Lots of times people make up their own nicknames. Actually, they have other people make up their nicknames. But my nickname is Brian with one eye. So I made a website. And the website is brianwithoneye.com. In case you're not sure how to spell it, you can go that way too. I like to have fun with all that. Actually, if you're ever at brianwithoneye.com, you can actually download some information from me if you'd like. And then you can actually look at my website. I'd love to have you look at it. The actual website is A Radical Vision. ARadicalVision.com is where I have all of my information in terms of my speaking, workshops, all those different things. And it has my contact information there as well. You know, I have fun with it, and I like to have my family have fun with it too. So they even got in on it one time with me. Obviously, some of them wink better than others. I love that photo. Colin's Max has been winking since he was 4, evidently. As we're going through all of this, Connie would come to me every once in a while as we're healing because, for 6 months I wasn't able to drive, so she would take me by the hand and she would say, "Let's go for a walk." Of course, during that time, I was sometimes reluctant because there's lots of treacherous things out there. Really, really treacherous things. There are things like this. This sidewalk represented some real treachery for me. There was not only the ledge, the unevenness, but also there was the curves. And then there was people coming from ahead of us, and even people coming from behind, because I didn't walk very fast. Well, she took my hand, and she got me started down the path. But in order for me to allow her to do that, I had to declare that I was blind. And when I did that, I was able to hold her hand, and eventually I was able to lead. And it took a long time. And one day, we even got caught in the rain. How cute is that? Aw. All this has helped me to create a radical vision. Well, I have a radical vision not just because of how I see And by the way, I can drive legally, but it's also helped me to create my own organization. And that organization is called A Radical Vision. And a radical vision is all about helping people to embrace their blindness to achieve a greater vision for their lives. I used to be in IT sales. I was in IT sales for 16 years. I worked at IBM. I've worked at some really, really cool places. But now, I work at this place. I'm the CEO of this place. The CEO of one. The CEO of me. And I have a radical vision. So my radical vision is to be able to help people to embrace their blindness, because we all have blindness. Sometimes we just need to admit it. It's even caused me to write this book. And writing this book has helped me an awful lot, because it's helped me to go from that metaphorical state of blindness, and sometimes that's not always a metaphor, but it takes me from blindness to sight to vision. Blindness to sight to vision. You'll notice that's everything that I do is what I talk about, is going from blindness to sight to vision. So I want you to ask yourself 3 questions. These are 3 questions that I asked myself as I was going through all this. And as I was going through this as well, I asked myself, if I can get through this, can I be able to help somebody else get through the same thing? I wanted to be able to do that. I really did. It was important for me to be able to have something to look forward to. So what do I want? Who am I becoming? And what can I do about it? What do I want? Who am I becoming? And what can I do about it? The great Harriet Tubman once said, I freed 1,000 slaves, and I could have freed 1,000 more if they'd only known that they were slaves. From our perspective, we've helped thousands of people see, and we could have helped thousands of more see if they'd only known or admitted that they were blind. That's why the first step is blindness, to admit that you're blind. Now, there are some tools that we help from a self-awareness perspective in order to help people to understand that they're blind. One of these tools is called the Johari window. Now, you look at that word, and it looks like it's probably pronounced Johari, but I pronounce it Johari because it was created by 2 guys. They're psychologists back in 1955. Their names happen to have been Joe and Harry. Now, thank goodness Harry didn't get top billing. Yeah, that would have been weird. Well, the Johari window is this. It's essentially looking at that top left quadrant where you have things that are known to yourself and things that are known to others. So I help people to understand that in order to develop as leaders, they have to be vulnerable. In order to develop as leaders, they have to solicit feedback. Soliciting feedback is going to allow you to make that first window, that top upper left-hand quadrant, make it bigger. When you solicit feedback, you're going to take away from that quadrant to the right of it. The quadrant to the right of it is going to go away because as you solicit feedback, you're going to understand, you have to understand, that feedback is a gift. And what do you say anytime you receive a gift? Thank you. So when you receive feedback, you have to do the same thing. You have to say thank you, because that's going to determine how you receive it in the future. That's going to determine the kind of feedback that you receive in the future. So that's why I work with managers, leaders, team members in order to help their teams in order to be able to grow. The next step after we've gone from blind is to go to sight. And when you have sight, you're going to be able to look at this sidewalk differently. It's not going to be so treacherous as it used to be because you can actually change your perspective. You can walk down that sidewalk the other way. And all of those ledges are going to be different. You know, the people coming from ahead and from behind are going to be, the other way, and there's also going to be those curves, but it's going to be different because you're taking a different perspective. You may be taking your customer's perspective. You may be taking your client or your patient's perspective. And then, finally, is vision. And when you have vision, you're going to be able to have self-awareness, much better self-awareness, because you've gone through that Joe Harry window. And you're going to be able to relate to people, adjust to your new circumstances. You're going to have a different perspective. You're going to walk down that sidewalk another way. Then you're going to be able to adapt and have a much greater insight and adopt all the different things that you're learning. Anybody that can ride with this guy, I don't know. My wife does it all the time, and I don't know how she does it. He can't see. He doesn't have his eyes open, or at least he appears not to. But those people that sit in that seat help me a lot because they see my blind spots. They see my blind spots, and that allows me in order to see what they see. The people that do that help me. They help me grow, but they also help us to grow other people. Again, ask yourself those three questions. What do I want? Who am I becoming? And what can I do about it? Those are three questions that I asked myself as I was going through, blindness. I asked myself, what do I want? Do I feel good about being in IT sales? I was all about, the money and all that stuff, and it was great, but there was something else. So who am I becoming? I knew I was becoming not the dad that I wanted to be. I knew I wasn't becoming the husband that I wanted to be. I wasn't becoming the son that I wanted to be or anything else. I knew that the person that I was becoming wasn't what I wanted to be. It wasn't what I wanted to be remembered for. I want to be remembered as someone that helped other people every chance I got. So what can you do about it? Well, I've worked with a lot of different people across the world that have helped me to be able to get to where I am today. In order to be able to stand in front of you all and help you to understand how you might have blind spots. And in order to understand how you might be able to take those blind spots and embrace them and do something better. I used to be the guy that laughed at other people's problems. I was always so incredulous why they were so deep in thought. And then this happened. And I'm able to have a different perspective. Everything changed. And I'm so glad that it did. So you're probably asking yourself, what did I learn? What did Brian Wagner learn from going through brain surgery? Well, I learned 4 things. 3 of them will be listed here. Everyone has a story. Taking action makes me feel better. Now, everyone has a story, sure, that's true. But you don't get to see it. I'm fortunate that my story is on my face. Nobody can miss it. You can see what I've been through. So it gives me an opening to be able to talk to people about it. Now, sometimes talking to people about it has different outcomes. Some people don't always understand and can't empathize, but it's important to be able to share that. Taking action makes me feel better. Now, I told you at one point, taking action didn't always do what I intended to do, but it still made me feel better. That's why every day I try to do something that will improve myself. And to laugh, even when you don't feel like it. When you first heard me talk about Brian with one eye, you probably weren't sure that you could laugh about that. But it's okay to laugh. Laugh even when you don't feel like it. And then, as you're typing in Brian with one eye, you kind of feel like, oh, this is kind of weird. But it's okay. The final thing that I learned is to get the right solution. So, there are how many doctors that I went through where they all said, we're not equipped for this sort of thing. That happened time and time and time again. That is why I love Ohio Health. Ohio Health helped me throughout all this. They helped me to understand that I needed to get the right solution. There's a favor that I'd like to ask of you, and the favor is that I would like for you to ask yourself those questions and to be able to really concentrate on what it is that you can do. What it is that you can do in order to help yourselves. Because that is what this is all about. This is not about me standing up here and doing anything other than serving you. I want to be able to help you because you've helped me. At this point, we have a few minutes to do a little bit of a question and answer period. I actually have some books. If somebody would like to ask a question, I will actually give you a book. And afterwards, if you want, I'd be happy to sign it after we're done or at a break or whenever that's convenient. So having said that, are there any questions? Yes, Dr. Bay. I seem relentlessly upbeat, but there are times that I was down in the dumps. How did I get back? There were times where I didn't feel like getting out of bed, and I probably didn't get out of bed. But when I did get out of bed, I made sure that I showered, and I got up and acted like I was going to work. I put on a nice shirt. Connie would be like, "Where are you going?" She knew I couldn't drive. So from my perspective, just doing something, even if it was a little thing, it helped. And I had a lot of people around me to encourage me. You know, I would come down, and my youngest son, Colin, he's 11 at the time. He'd be sitting at the breakfast table, and I'd look at him, and I'm like, Colin, because both my eyelids are still down. I'd say, like, Colin, what do you think? He says, come a little more open. He's like, oh, yeah, Dad. Looks good. So, yeah, having other people help me.
What kind of occupational speech or physical therapy did you have to go through after your surgery?
I didn't have any occupational speech or therapy. I went to the ophthalmologist, and he helped me a little bit, but there was no therapy at all. Is that right, Connie? She still knows more than I do.
What's your driving record like?
What was that?
What's your driving record like?
What's my driving record? I have only, I don't have any accidents. I've not had any tickets. It's scary as hell. But I have a perfect driving record. I have had some fender benders. I have these disposable mirrors on my car. Well, they're not. They're retractable mirrors. So, for example, pulling into that parking garage today, it's hard for me to get close enough, but not too close. So, yeah, the mirrors have been damaged a few times. But overall, no tickets. Nobody's caught me. There was a time when actually right after I got my driver's license back, and Connie said, will you go pick up Colin from this birthday party? I went and picked him up. It was after dark. Not a good idea. I'm driving, and it's in Hilliard, so I thought, what bad can happen? Well, I'm driving, and I'm at a stoplight, and I have to go forward. Well, it turns out that the road doesn't go forward, and you have to do a little bit of a jog. I didn't jog. I didn't zig when it zagged. So I ended up driving down the sidewalk. No one was hurt. I backed my car up and got back on the road, got to the next light, put my arm across Colin, and I said, "Don't tell your mother." It was literally one of those moments. Yes, sir. The Maker's Mark wasn't a prescription, but it felt good. In terms of going to sleep, I was never concerned about going to sleep. I was never smart enough to know that might be a problem. So from my perspective, just how do I want to answer that? Going to sleep. Going to sleep was just one of those things where I actually am pretty good at it. Right, Connie? I fall asleep usually once I hit the pillow. Last night was different. I had something on my mind. I'm not sure what that could have been, but I wasn't able to get to sleep at all. But no, I don't have a concern about that. My vision right now, the light is in my eye, so there's always something. But I see pretty much from here, kind of on here. So usually I don't see anything on my right. So for example, my hand out right now, I don't see it. A lot of people understand me now. They know they need to get into my field of vision. So they'll get to here. Even that isn't great vision. So I can see you from my left eye, but I also see some other things down here, and it makes that double. So when my eye pops open, because sometimes it does pop open, I have to squint to get it closed because that is one of those things where it creates more double vision. So yeah, it's a radical vision. It's the name. It's a good name for a company or a website. Yeah, so it's not great.
So I have 2 questions.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm over here on your visual side.
Oh.
There you go.
Hi.
2 things. One, I'm a therapist, and we have a terrible time with people wanting to drive too quickly. Do you talk to people about that in your experience with driving? I mean, obviously you're here with us today because of the whole experience, but your radical vision, and do you go out and speak to people about the driving experience and that kind of thing?
I
No.
don't.
It's a very
I didn't
independent
talk
thing.
about it for a long time because I was afraid, they would take it away from me. Because, seriously, I don't see well, but I see well enough to be able to drive. People can't understand how I can see double and still be able to drive. So I have 2 images. I know which one to pick. So I don't talk to people about that too much. Actually, this is probably one of the first times.
The other question I have is, after the surgery and the recovery, have they given you any kind of prognosis? Do you have a risk for other things to happen, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so like I said, I have another cavernous malformation in there, so that could cause problems eventually, and that's more towards the front of my neck, and I guess, and it is in a situation where if it bled, it could put pressure on the nerves to control my digestive and my breathing. So that's a whole other situation. But the one cavernous malformation is gone. I have time for about one more question.
I have a question about how well you use humor. I think everyone in this room has helped people for whom health has changed their physical appearance, and that creates a communication barrier with people they don't know or haven't met before. You use humor beautifully to bridge that gap. I just wondered if you have other ways too, especially when you're meeting someone for the first time. You do it so well.
Well, thank you. Are there other ways to bridge the gap or other ways to use humor? Is that what you mean? Both. So, no, I haven't really thought of that. I meet people wherever they are. I like to do that because that's really the important thing, is to understand who they are, form a relationship. That's big for me because I love to know people. I love to know about people and what they're doing and what's going on. That's really where you end up making that Johari window, that first window, a much bigger window, is when you know people and they know you. That's probably the best way of doing it. Humor is just one of those quirky things that I'm all about, and being a guy that has fun with other people, I need to have fun with myself. And my friends are ruthless. I'm youngest of 10 kids. I have 7 older brothers. They're ruthless. They love me, but you just gotta be tough-skinned. Sorry. I need to wrap up with one quick story. And the quick story is about the work that I'm doing at the Ohio School. Well, I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to talk about the Ohio School for the Blind, although we've already mentioned it. But with these visually impaired kids, they have this program, and the program is, it's an after-school program. The after-school program is designed to help kids after they graduate from high school. I went there thinking that I would be able to tell them an awful lot about my problems because, I know all this, and I've done it, and I've, just been there. Well, I can throw that out the window because they ended up teaching me. That's been phenomenal. But in this in different classes that we have, there's one class where it is a yoga class. We help them, with their fitness after and their mentalness after high school. Same thing with CrossFit. Another is a cooking class. The other one that I love is the knitting class. And the knitting class is really where it happens because I'm a knitter. Right, Connie? Sure. Well, I'm not so much a knitter, but the first class we had to go to Joann Fabrics in order to get our knitting supplies. Now, how many of you here have ever been to Joann's? Quite a lot? Yeah? Well, I'd never been there. We walked in the upper right-hand part of the store, and the knitting supplies happened to be in the back left. So, of course, we had to weave our way through the store in order to get to the knitting supplies. Well, once we got there, we had 10 kids with us, and they're visually impaired, but some of them have some light perception. Some of them don't have any at all. On top of their visual impairments, they sometimes have mental impairments as well as physical impairments. So they have some tough times to go through. I tell you, it's amazing what these kids can do. Well, we're looking for different things, and one of those things is we need to have a certain type of yarn. It's got to be as thick as possible. That yarn will help them to be able to knit. As we're picking out yarn, some of the kids that have no light perception at all want to make sure that they have certain colors of yarn. Can you imagine that? Somebody that can't see anything at all, they want to make sure that this is scarlet and gray. This one, well, the reason why they want to do that is because they're knitting a scarf for their mom. They're taking something and they're making something for somebody else. How many times do you think that they ever have made something for somebody else? Well, that's been great in order to help them be able to do that. And so they actually needed to have needles that are large as well. And some of them had a modified loom. And the modified loom is one of these things where it is actually 4 pegs. And when you're knitting, and so we had the first class, and then as you're knitting, you have to cast on and you have to cast off. How many knitters are here? Any knitters? Oh, yeah. I'm raising my hand. Well, anyways, the knitters are all about making sure that you're doing certain things with, well, as you're using the modified loom, you take a hook. And you take that hook, you put it in the groove, and you take it underneath that lower string, and you take it up over top of the string on top, and up over top of the peg. Once you take it up over top of the peg, you have made a loop, or a stitch, however you want to look at it. Well, one of my friends, I'd only been there a few weeks, so we weren't on a first-name basis yet. One of my friends, and he's not good with names anyways, we agreed to call each other friend. I said, "Friend, how you doing?" He's like, "I'm having a hard time. I keep getting, somebody tells me I keep getting 2 strings, and then they tell me that I'm getting the string in the middle, or I'm not getting a string at all. Can you help me?" I said, "Sure." So I do this. I help him to get the string and get it up over top. But as you can imagine, this was not a short process. It took me, it seemed like an hour, probably only 10 minutes, but it took me a long time. So you can imagine how difficult it is for me to explain to you, maybe the non-knitters that are here, how difficult it is for me to explain to you what this knitting is all about. Imagine how difficult it must be for someone that can't see to be able to knit. Someone that can't use their hands correctly to be able to knit. Someone that doesn't have an IQ like you to be able to knit. Well, once we got, that first knit, he was like, "Okay, now what?" I said, "Friend," I said, "wait a minute. You did it. You did it." I did it? He didn't know. I did it. I did it. Just then, someone in the back left of the class says, "He did it. He made a loop. He made a loop." Someone else heard it. "He made a loopy. He made a loopy. He made a loopy. He made a loopy. Loopy. He made a loopy. He made a loopy." They were so excited because he made a loop. One loop. That was the start of a scarf for his mom. Working with these kids has taught me so much. That's just the beginning. But so much about who we are, how we perceive people, and what they are. So I want you to ask yourself 3 more questions. What am I not seeing? What are you not seeing? Are you that guy driving the car? Do you have blind spots? Are you taking people for granted? Who can help me? Do you have a mentor? Do you have a coach? Are there people around you that you can look up to? People that have what you want to have? And then, what action can I take? What action can I take in order to get there? I've met a lot of great people here today. There are people like Sarah. Sarah sometimes spells her name with an H, Sometimes she doesn't spell it with an H. Well, there's no mistaking how to spell my name. My name is Brian, and that's with one I. Thank you.